Hi, my name is Paige, and I've worked on developer tools for years. First on machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow and JAX, and more recently on VS Code, GitHub.dev, and Codespaces. I'm here today to talk about GitHub Copilot, which is an AI pair programmer for developers. It's built right into your editor, and it gives you tailored suggestions for the code that you're writing, bringing the collective wisdom of the world's developers straight to you. To give us some behind-the-scenes insight into Copilot, we've brought in the lead architect for the project, Oege Moor. Oege, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Oege Moor. I'm the VP of GitHub Next. GitHub Next explores the frontiers of software engineering. Our most important project in that space is Copilot, and I'm very excited to talk about that with you today.
I've been able to use Copilot for the last several months, and I've been so enchanted by how well it works most of the time. But there are some times where Copilot might give me a recommendation that doesn't quite make sense. Could you talk a little bit about why that might be, why it's so good, and then also sometimes why it might run into snags or misunderstandings?
Often when it goes wrong because it doesn't have enough context. It just doesn't know enough about what you're trying to do. So let's say we're talking about security. It doesn't know that security is important to the application you're working on, and so you have to be explicit. If you actually said in a comment, sanitize all user input, it will do that. But you have to think of it as a robot that takes your commands very literally. So we do recommend that you use the standard tooling, the standard safeguards, things like GitHub Advanced Security, to check all the suggestions and make sure that there's no unwanted problems there.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that the best way to get performance out of Copilot is to be super specific. I often find that Copilot helps me better articulate the kind of work that I'd like to have happen in my code. Because in order to get it to have these super accurate responses and super accurate suggestions, you have to be very, very clear. Whenever you have a power tool that you're perhaps using to build a house, you can implement safety guards or some sort of feature that helps protect people from potentially falling into those dangerous situations. What kind of safety features are we engineering for Copilot so that we can help protect users against some of those security vulnerability concerns or potentially toxicity?
Perhaps the most important thing that we are planning to do is to filter the training set so that it doesn't see the bad examples. If it doesn't see the bad examples, it can't imitate them. The other one is use reinforcement learning to steer it away from bad patterns and make sure that it doesn't do those things again. Or even more explicitly, when they see security problems or problems with bias and toxicity, many people write to copilot-safety@github.com, and those reports are tremendously helpful to us in improving the safety of Copilot, putting in more filters to make sure that those harms don't happen.
So another thing that I've observed frequently when using Copilot is that sometimes I get feedback that feels almost verbatim from documentation or from tutorials or examples of code that I've seen on GitHub. I especially run into this when looking at machine learning framework suggestions as an example.
Many people think that the model behind Copilot somehow stores the training set and it just picks snippets that are maybe relevant to the new situation. That is in fact not the case. You see these examples that seem too close to existing code. It's typically because there's not enough context. If you show a lot of context, a lot of things that are special to your application deeper down in a file, you will see that it tailors its suggestion very much to the context where you're working. It does have a higher chance of being closer to the patterns it saw in training when there's not that much context involved. We have actually measured this. There's a really interesting research blog on the Copilot website. In practice, it happens very rarely indeed. Nevertheless, we do want to protect our users against potential problems with this sort of thing. For that purpose, we've built a duplication tracker. It's not yet out, but it will be soon. that indexes all the public source code, and it will actually suppress suggestions that have too much overlap with existing code.
Excellent. That's so exciting to hear. And as a person who uses VS Code snippets quite frequently, I do have to say that the experience of using Copilot is very dissimilar. Like it feels a little bit more like having a helpful person that prevents me from having to do a Google search to figure out how to implement a certain kind of scenario. So the model behind Copilot was trained on all the public code and the internet. How is this different than other models that might have been created before? I believe Copilot's base model was GPT-3, correct? How is Copilot very, very different from those previous instances of source code understanding and generation?
So I think that, as you said, what is different is the sheer scale. The fact that it has been trained on most of the public source code that currently exists in the world. Personally, I find this very exciting. It's, in a way, Copilot embodies the collective knowledge of the entire programming community and puts it at the fingertips of every individual. Not just at the fingertips of extremely experienced programmers, but also at the fingertips of the next 100 million developers who do not have access to computer science education, university, or coding boot camps.
How can Copilot help reduce things like time spent on tasks? We already talked a little bit about like replacing Google searches. What are you most excited about for Copilot as applied to developer productivity?
So it's exactly what you just said. Previous autocomplete tools were really tools that help you type faster. You already know what you want to do, but it takes you less keystroke. Copilot actually helps you with some of the research, the web searches and the like that you need to do. And we think that it's a huge time saving. One of the things that we've seen there is that for Python developers, more than 30% of their newly created code, more than 30%, is written by the AI. So that's actually quite a lot. I mean, people clearly are finding this thing very useful.
And I'm also excited to hear that there are continuing developments for Copilot. If you could share some things that are potentially on the roadmap or that you're aiming towards.
With pleasure. We're now seeing a glimpse of what is possible with this type of technology. Copilot, as it is today, just helps you create new code. You write some comments in English, and it will write the code to come with it for you. But what about the other way around? You write some code and you ask the AI to explain it to you. It actually writes the comments. It writes the explanation. Another application that we have a prototype of that I'm very excited about is automated refactoring. Imagine that you want to say, I want to take this library that currently is a dependency of my project and I want to replace it by an almost similar library. And then finally, the obvious thing, automated code review. Have the AI sit in the code review process and suggest there may be a better way of implementing this particular function. Or indeed, perhaps you want to include some extra comments here because this is a little bit difficult to read. So we see applications of artificial intelligence everywhere in the development process, and we released a first example of what can be done, but much more is to come.
It sounds like we're just beginning to explore all of the ways machine learning and deep learning can be applied to the entire end-to-end developer lifecycle. How can engineers get started today?
They should sign up for the technical preview of GitHub Copilot. By doing so, you help actually make it better.
It's so good to have spoken with you today, Oege, and I learned a ton.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You know, Copilot is something that I wish I had when I was first learning how to program as a planetary scientist. And I'm confident that it'll unlock superpowers and create opportunities for folks who might not necessarily see themselves as developers today. Copilot is under heavy development, and the improvements are driven by every single developer that uses it. And you're helping us make it safe. So sign up today for the preview on copilot.github.com. We can't wait to see what you build. Bye, folks.